there's been no chatter about
There's
that
no-
at all.
No, there's never going to be any information.
There's never going to
out.
be any
Yes.
information. Yeah.
We entered the submarine race rather late. We entered only in the late 60s, in 1967, when Pakistan already had its first submarine.
Why are we trying to attempt both technologies? Why not put all your eggs in one basket? Say
Right.
that, let's just go the nuclear way
Yeah.
and invest heavily in
Yeah.
nuclear-powered attack submarines and build all of them that.
So we know the power of a nuclear-powered attack submarine. It is the ultimate undersea predator.
What I'm trying to show to our listeners and viewers right now is the eye-popping amounts of money it takes to build
Yeah.
submarines. So why are they so expensive? And my earlier question, why does the government say it takes so long to operate?
Brought down the cost was if we had pursued a single line for conventional submarines.
Okay.
We should have just gone down that one Indian submarine line.
Welcome to Inner Defense. This week, we're going to take a deep dive, pun maybe intended, into India's submarine ambitions, especially projects that are sort of under development right now. We won't look as much at what India currently has in terms of submarine, around 7 to 18 submarines that India currently possesses, but more in terms of what India's future outlook is in terms of developing more and newer and more technologically advanced submarines. On this episode, I'll look at the various projects that we have, especially focusing on Project 75I, Project 75 India, which right now seems the closest to sort of seeing light of day. Basically, once it gets government approval, though it still hasn't gotten that. On this episode, I think I'm going to be quite out of depth. Again, pun may be intended, because with me is somebody whom everybody in the field of defense regards as the foremost expert when it comes to the world of submarines, except apart from people from the forces itself. But when it comes to journalists, I think Sandeep Unnithan is the name that comes to mind when you think of submarines. Hey, Sandeep. How are you?
Hi, Dave. Hey, that's a lot of this thing. I have a hubris alarm which goes off, and it was, blaring right now.
Yeah, but no,
But thanks,
yeah, that's true though actually, and in fact, it's not just people who've told me. When I've researched for submarines, not just for this episode,
Yeah.
but also for previous episodes, I think the pieces that have been of most help to me are actually pieces that you wrote.
Right. Thanks.
Many of them for us actually, for the India magazine, especially the one that you wrote on the top secret project back in 2017,
Right.
which was about the advanced technology vehicle, the SSBNs, the
Yes.
new
The newer S5s.
yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think I'm going overboard when I say what I said about you, which is exactly why I want to begin this podcast and this episode on a personal note actually, and sort of do what every journalist avoids doing in their lifetime, which is become the story themselves.
Right.
I want to know about how you ended up on this submarine beat. As journalists, we all, reporters especially, we all have beats.
Yeah.
But you have just broad-based beats. You
Right.
have reporters covering crime, you have
Right,
reporters
right.
covering your parliament, you have reporters covering defense,
Yes.
like you and several of your
Right.
colleagues and contemporaries. But you've developed this niche of writing about submarines, not just Navy, by the way. Even that would be understandable, that even within defense, you have a
Right.
fascination for Navy, and most of your coverage is about the Navy. But you seem to have developed this fascination for submarines and this extensive reportage that obviously I've read. So how did it happen? Was it something of a personal interest to you, or did it just happen?
Well, firstly, thanks again, Dave, for all those kind words about me. Not all of which are true, by the way. But Dave, the thing is that I was just over the years when I've been reading about submarines, I kind of understood that this was literally the arm of the future, and it has always been the case for 110 years now. Ever since submarines have been around, since the First World War. In fact, if you even go back into time, in the 1860s, when the first submarine was deployed in combat, it was a Confederate ship called the Hundley, with 8 crew members. Most brave submarine actors, literally a suicide mission where they were trying to break a blockade where the Union warship called the Housatonic was on patrol outside Charleston Harbor, and the Hundley with its 8-man crew and a spar torpedo went and struck at the side of this warship. it exploded. The spar torpedo exploded, but the blast sank the Hunley.
Okay.
And the remains of that submarine were recovered only a couple of years back.
Wow. Okay.
So all crew perished in that first significant attack by a submarine on a warship, and that was in the 19th century, just a couple of years after our 1857 War of Independence.
Right.
I mean, that's how long the West has been working on submarines, and that's the kind of technology leap that they have ahead of us. And if you look at the numbers also, this is nothing to do with them being better than the surface navy or anything of that. So I think in terms of return on investments, submarines as weapons of war, as offensive instruments of national power, bring a bigger bang for the buck when there's an all-out war, for instance. And this has been felt all through conflict, whether it's the First World War, it's the Second World War, and of course through the Cold War and our own particular history, particularly between India and Pakistan, and now most lately with China. But when I read more about the submarine campaign, and it wasn't just the U-boat campaign that I was reading, I was looking at the way the Americans waged that submarine war against the Imperial Japanese. The Empire of Japan was destroyed not just by the US Navy, it was destroyed by the US submarine arm, where they launched the most devastating submarine campaign in history and sank more than 50% of all the Japanese merchantmen and warships that were sunk during the war. And when that happened, such a large number of losses, the Empire of Japan ceased to exist because it was a thalassocracy, depended on the secure sea lanes of communication. And when the Americans mounted this campaign, the Empire of Japan ceased to exist. And this was mounted with just about 1,600 submarine patrols. So they were very powerful weapons of war. Of course, we know the German U-boat campaign.
Yes.
But that was a disaster. It ended in disaster because, while the German submariners were second to none, literally, they had all the technological advantages. But when it came to sheer numbers and ASW, they had no match for that. They met their match with the Americans and the British, and they lost that war literally. But it was the American submarine campaign in the Pacific which was so important. And then later also, when I studied military history, I found the Western powers being more reluctant to give us top-of-the-line submarines.
They still are.
Well, they would be, when it comes to nuclear submarines.
Yes,
but the Russians kind of capitalized on that. They used submarines as literally their calling card. Now, we are talking about the MiG-21s, is a top-of-the-line supersonic aircraft that they offered us first. They were also the first to offer us advanced submarines, which the West would not offer us, simply because of our location, where we are located in the Indian Ocean region. The West did not want a powerful submarine fleet in the region of one of the most vital shipping lanes, that is the Indian Ocean region. And that explains our tack towards Russia, first the Soviet Union, and of course now Russia. And submarines have been a very integral part of this journey. And also, these have become political instruments as well. Back in the day when India was developing nuclear weapons, the Advanced Technology Vehicle project, the ATV project for the nuclear submarine, was for a submarine that would carry nuclear weapons.
Yes.
So the political leadership understood this way back in the 60s. I keep going back to this paper by P.N. Huxer, where he talks about the need for India to have nuclear submarines, and nuclear submarines carrying nuclear weapons, right, which is a ballistic missile submarine. So the political leadership understood this, and they have been pushing and nurturing our strategic submarine program. Of course, there are two types of submarines.
Yes.
There are strategic submarines which carry nuclear weapons, and there are tactical boats which are used by the Navy for which are part of the surface fleet, which are part of the carrier battle groups.
Yeah.
But this interest in submarines actually grew as a result of reading all of this. The utility of submarines to shaping maritime warfare, and how they're so integral today to our, not only our defense strategy, but also to our nuclear doctrine.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, they've given the kind of advances in sensory tech or, satellite imagery. We will have no option but to move most of our warheads out to sea, where they're the most secure, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, you would be under the water and no one could see where you are.
Yeah.
You're in a floating, missile base far away from the thing. No first strike can knock out your capacity to launch a second strike. So they're the most secure arm of the triad, which is the mix of air, land, and sea-launched nuclear vectors. So I think all of this combined with the kind of technological breakthroughs that we had made in the nuclear submarine program, which is when I first reported on it in the early mid-2000s, when the ATV project had begun picking up steam. And I saw that while our conventional boat line was floundering because we didn't seem to have the kind of vision that we had for the strategic fleet, the kind of breakthroughs that we have made over there, like entire ecosystems have been set up. And we've discussed it in past installments of your show, where we spoke about how we need to adopt that model for other key cutting edge R&D programs like, fighter jet engines and fifth generation fighter aircraft and all this. This is a model for us to study. And I think I was really impressed by how, for a country which had never really made that kind of cutting edge technology, we had managed to not only perfect a submarine propulsion package, which is the nuclear reactor, but also to field a fully operational SSBN, nuclear powered ballistic missile submarine, which is something that is one of the most complex defense platforms ever. I would think that apart from a US supercarrier, this would be one of the most complicated complex pieces of defense technology. I mean, you have a nuclear reactor which can theoretically run a submarine forever. As long as the reactor is running, it can keep going. It's the endurance of the submarine is only limited by the endurance of the crew and the food supply that you carry on board. So all of these actually propel my interest in the submarine now. It's primarily the strategic side which I actually started reporting about, primarily because there was very little writing about it, given the kind of the secrecy around it. And this is a project that's it's done really well. I think we've not only has it got a lot of attention and funding, but the interest from our political leadership in that, the defense national strategic interests, and of course the Indian Navy, and the ecosystem that you've managed to create for that. 80% indigenization in this, 90%, that, and for a platform, I'm talking of a platform that's about over 6,000 tons, right? That is huge. Conventional submarines are, a little over 1,500 tons. This is something like 3-4 times the size of a conventional submarine, which you will always see in the public eye, by the way, a Scorpene submarine or a Kilo-class or an HTW.
Actually.
but you'll never see a nuclear-powered attack submarine. I mean, they are quiet. They stay away from the public gaze. But the Arihant possibly has like three or four
photos. That's
four photographs, exactly. And if someone's carried a picture of an Arihant in an article that they're writing about the ATVP, you can be pretty much sure that with a 90% chance that photograph is going to be a wrong picture that's used. It's like, there are just about 4 images. And I'm, tired of telling the organization that I worked in the past, look, there have only been 3 or 4 photographs of the Arihant that have ever been taken. One released by the government, the second one behind Prime Minister Modi when he felicitated the crew for their deterrent patrol, and possibly 2 others. One clicked on a beach, and the fourth one was clicked with, it was some distance away from the dockyard. So I mean, that's the way the submarine fleet is. That I think this is one area that we should be really proud of as Indians, because of the kind of exclusive club of countries that we've entered into. There are just 5 other countries that have done what we have done here.
Right. That's true. And I, as somebody who works on the desk of a website, news website, it's very frustrating when you have to do stories about India's nuclear submarines, nuclear ballistic submarines, and not have photos, because you want to have variety, right? But you run into the same 3 or 4 photos that you were talking about. And it's so secretive, actually, Sandeep, that Arihant is the only one that was, publicly sort of recognized. Okay, we are launching this submarine.
Yes.
The Arighat and the Aridman, if I'm not wrong, the third one that's called. No one even knows if it was formally launched out into water, what's happening with them, whether they're out on patrol. There's been no chatter about
There's
that
no,
at all.
no. There's never going to be any
There's never
information
going to be
out.
any
Yes.
information, yeah. But by the way, it's not just the ballistic submarines
Yes.
for which there has been not a lot of extensive writing.
Yeah.
I think the submarine projects of the Navy in general don't
Yeah.
really seem to have gotten that much attention and that much writing, which is exactly why I wanted to do this episode with
Yeah.
especially you. And we're gonna mostly steer clear of the ballistic missile submarines because I think that deserves a special episode on its
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
But really talk about the conventional ones and the various projects that we have
Yes.
ongoing. So at the beginning, like I said, we have around 17, 18 odd submarines. Again,
Yes.
I'm not counting the nuclear ballistic missile submarines. I'm only counting the conventional ones, whether
Yes.
they are diesel electric or the newer ones. Now you have an alphabet soup is what I came
Yes.
across. You have the Project 75. You
Yeah.
have the P75 India, which
Yes.
earlier was P75 Alpha. There is apparently something P76, but that has apparently been renamed to P77. I'm not sure. I'm very confused.
Right.
What's with this 70 series? What are these different projects? So lay it out for us.
Yeah.
What are we looking at when we
Right.
talk about conventional submarines for India?
Right.
What are the different kind of tech that we're looking at in terms of the future outlook,
Right.
not what we already have?
Okay.
Obviously.
So you want me to start in the beginning?
Yes, please.
Okay. Right. So the reason you don't hear a lot about the submarine arm is because it's called the silent service, right? And it stays underwater and it's mostly silent. Though you ask my submariner friends, they'd be very upset with the fact that the silent service isn't getting its due, because they are meant to be silent and out of sight, and as it turns out of mind as well. So, the thing is that we entered the submarine race rather late. We entered only in the late 60s, in 1967, when Pakistan already had its first submarine, right? The USS Diablo, which was a Tench-class fleet submarine of the United States Navy, which was designed for operating against the Imperial Japanese Navy, as I told you. It was meant to transit the Pacific and fight in the Japanese home territory. That is how long range these submarines were. Literally tens of thousands of kilometers. It had a petrol, it could patrol something like endurance of about 10,000 kilometers or more. Right? A very, very large, very competent submarine, which the Pakistanis called the Ghazi. The PNS Ghazi, which was inducted in 1964, if I remember correctly, and it was used in the 1965 war. And that's when India realized that, hey, listen, we don't have our submarine arm. And while officers have been trained in submarine technology and how it operates, we don't have submarines of our own. That's when we started going out to the British, of course, first, and we asked them for a submarine. They didn't want to part with one of their contemporary ones. They said, look, why don't you take an old Second World War submarine, which we didn't want to. We said, look, we don't want that submarine. It's an old boat. We want something more contemporary. And that's when the Russians entered. The Soviet Union said, listen, take our Foxtrot-class submarine, state of the art. And that's how we, tacked to the Soviet Union. My co-author, Captain Samant, MNR Samant, who he was the commanding officer of the third submarine, which came from the Soviet Union, the Foxtrot-class submarine, the INS Karanj. And there were four. There were Kalvari, Khanderi, Karanj, and Kursura. So I think a lot of my love for submarines also comes from Captain Samant and all his old submariner tales. But he's an interesting case of an officer who was trained by the Royal Navy in the hope that we would get a British submarine. But then it so happened that we didn't get it. So he quickly went to the Soviet Union, Captain Samant, and he came with the third submarine. And so it was a political issue at that time where we've kind of figured the West was denying us technology. We started building those submarines. And then we bought a second batch of Foxtrot-class submarines, 8 of them. So we finally had about 8. Then what happened, and I think this is what I call the original sin. In the 1971 war, our submarines did not draw blood in terms of not sinking enemy warships or merchantmen. And I think that has to do with another bit of politics, which is, submarines are not ordinary instruments of war. When you deploy submarines, there is a lot of political, angst around the topic. Positive identification was made mandatory for the submariners in 71, which means that you have to positively identify this ship as being an enemy combatant, thereby jeopardizing your own safety. So it is quite possible that our submariners, who are all of them were deployed in active combat. But this thing of positive identification is something that worked against them, engaging the enemy. And I've heard this from some of our veterans who took part in the war, and they were disappointed. But still, the Navy actually went ahead with the submarine arm, despite the new blood being drawn in 71. And we had a very robust submarine acquisition program. Early 80s, we went to the Germans. 1981, we signed a deal for the Type 209 1500 class submarines. Very, very advanced submarines. The Germans were very happy to share technology with us, and I hear stories of how they gave us all the blueprints on microfilms, and they even gave us the microfilm readers, just to make sure that we couldn't say that, hey, we can't read your microfilms. But they were very generous with sharing technology, and that was our best bet at true transfer of technology. But then you know what happened: corruption, political issue. The system went into a freeze, into a funk, and they said, look, we can't deal with the Germans. There's been this bribery allegation. HGW became a bad word, just as Bofors had become. Bofors was meant to give you 155 howitzers. HGW was meant to give you submarine building technology. And we assembled two. We bought two, we assembled two, and we were supposed to build two more on our own from scratch. That never happened. And so then we started looking around. So then the Soviets entered again. We bought 8 kilo-class submarines off the shelf from them, but no submarine building technology. We bought 2 more from the Russian Federation, 10. So we had this whole big mass of numbers that we're looking at, 3 different types of submarines. So in the late 90s, the Indian Navy came out with one of the most far-sighted defense acquisition programs, which was the 30-year submarine building program, where they said that over the next 3 decades, we want to acquire 24 conventional submarines. And this would be done in the following process: that we would acquire some submarines from abroad, from 6 of them, and we would then build the rest of them in India. 18 of them would be built in India, based on the transfer of technology that we got from the foreign OEM. There was also another plan for 6 SSNs, nuclear-powered attack submarines. So that would be a total of about 30 submarines, right? So it's 30 submarines in over the next 3 decades. Now that plan came out in the late 90s. It was kind of, it wasn't approved. It was approved by the government, but not given budgetary support. See, that's the most important thing. If you approve a plan without the budgetary support, without an industrial building plan, all this is just, it's a good proposal on paper. It remains on paper. So in that sense, I think that was what hobbled this plan. The idea was excellent. No other service had come out with such a forward-looking policies as the Navy had done in the late 90s. But now, if you ask me, Dave, 5 years from now, it's going to be 30 years. Where are we with the conventional submarines? How many of those 24 submarines have we acquired?
I think not a single one.
6 of them. So we are 18 submarines short. And the number, how the 24 submarines actually came up is, the idea is that at any given point, you would have 1/3 of these submarines
in service,
would be offline, would be, repairs, renovation, repair, all of that thing. And you would have the remainder of these in active duty. Now, here's the other thing. Now, did this 30-year submarine building plan factor in the PLA Navy? No, it did not. It was only meant to tackle the Pakistani threat. The Pakistan Navy's threat, surface ships and submarines, of course. So now you're looking at the game having been completely changed after 25 years. You're looking at not just Pakistan, which is a very robust submarine arm of its own. They sank one of our warships in the 1971 war, the INS Kukri. They have acquired 8 submarines from China. They are progressively going to be inducted over the next couple of years. Beginning this year, the first unit of that, which is a Chinese-built version of the Kilo-class submarine, which we've operated, the Yuan-class. Now, we are in a crisis when it comes to the conventional submarine arm, which is the SSKs, because of these numbers, right? We are looking at block obsolescence, which is where block obsolescence is when entire batch of submarines goes out of service because they were inducted at roughly the same time.
Wow.
It will be time for them to exit at roughly the same time. So in a sense, the Indian Navy's submarine arm would be looking at the same crisis that the Air Force is looking at when it comes to squadron numbers. We're good on surface ships, right? We have a fair mix of surface ships, destroyers. We're well resourced there. When it comes to submarines, I think we've already crossed one lost decade, which is roughly from the mid 90s to the mid 2000s, when we hadn't acquired any submarines, which would be from the years 1994 to about 2004. I think in this decade we'd acquired just 2 submarines or so, and these were just quick off-the-shelf buys from the Russian Federation, but we hadn't acquired any other major thing. We didn't have the submarine building capability either. So now we're going to be looking at another lost decade, starting from our induction of the last submarine, the last Scorpene-class submarine this year, to say about 2024, 2025, when possibly the first Project 75I submarine would enter service. Of course, it could happen a little earlier. Maybe if everything flies, permissions come through and all of that,
right.
and the deal goes through. Well, one lives in hope, Dave. The first submarine could come in about 7 or 8 years if everything goes well. But if it doesn't, then you're looking at a big hole in our submarine capabilities, conventional submarine capabilities, when you'll have to start retiring all the submarines that you acquired in the 1980s. So the 80s were literally the high mark of India's conventional submarine fleet, where you inducted a whole lot of German submarines, Russian submarines, at something like 10 plus 14 submarines were inducted in the 1980s, beginning from 82 to about 94, 10, 12 years. You were inducting a submarine every 2 years or so, 1 or 2 years. Now that hasn't happened. And what you're having to do is that your older submarines, you're giving them life extensions. You're giving them, instead of one submarine would have just one medium refit, here you're giving them a second medium refit, an MR as it's called, to extend its life.
Yeah, right. A bit of a tangent here, and I was going to ask this much later in the episode, but I think right now is the right moment, is to talk about the 2 different technologies that you are largely talking about in your previous answer. The 75I project, you have what is known as the AIP,
Yes.
the Air Independent Propulsion Plug, that is supposed to be added in the submarines. That essentially, basically, what it means, on my brief understanding, it's a diesel-powered engine essentially, but it does not have to surface to grab air as often, so it sort of gives that submarine endurance. So in my head, I like to sort of say it's like a pseudo-nuclear submarine because it can stay underwater for longer.
Right.
And then you have the SSN project, which is nuclear-powered attack submarines, submarines that do not carry ballistic missiles, but they are powered by a nuclear reactor, so they have the same endurance, but they are faster, and they are like sort of a fighter jet, basically, underwater.
Underwater fighter jets.
Underwater fighter jets, so break down these 2 technologies for us, and a very crucial and big question for me. Why are we trying to attempt both technologies? Why not put all your eggs in one basket, say that, let's just go the nuclear way and invest heavily in nuclear powered attack submarines and build all of them that? Because if I'm not wrong, I could be wrong, you can correct me. I think the US submarine fleet is totally nuclear powered.
Right. Good question, Dave. And, so to explain the first part of the question is that there is only one kind of nuclear submarine. A true submarine is actually a nuclear submarine.
Okay.
Everything else is a submersible, right? So conventional submarines are essentially submersibles.
Right.
They submerge, they operate underwater for a fixed period of time. And because they are diesel electric, so what they do is they have a diesel engine which runs underwater, which then charges the batteries. And that battery gives them the underwater endurance. But the thing is that the diesel engine is an air-breathing engine. So every 48 hours, the submarine needs to either surface or it needs to stick up a mast, a snorkel, from which it will draw air to run its diesels so that the diesels can charge the batteries. So when the submarine is running underwater, it's actually running on batteries, on battery power. It's like really silent. So it's like all of us with our phone charger, looking for a charging point. So that's how submarines are usually underwater after about 48 hours underwater, So they're looking for a charging. So they have to kind of get up for that air, that breath of air. And that is when you're most vulnerable.
Yes.
Right? Because today, with the kind of sensors that are available, you have infrared sensors where you will have not just manned LRMPS aircraft, but you will also have drones, which can cover vast swaths of the ocean. And all it needs to see is that little heat spot there. There's a little red dot in the middle of the ocean. What's that? Well, that's a snorkeling submarine, right? So that's when the submarine is most vulnerable. And all technologies over the last 100 years, all submarine building technology has been to increase the underwater endurance of the submarine. And you had all kinds of things. The Germans, of course, the Germans. It has to be the Germans. They are the first ones to come up with this electric boot, the electro boot thing, and the AIP. They had something called the Walter peroxide engine, which would generate oxygen underwater, which would then run the diesel underwater, so you didn't have to surface for air. So they would always look at extending the life of their underwater thing. But of course, the Americans were one step ahead. They, perfected the atomic weapon, and one of the byproducts of that, and of course the nuclear reactor, was the undersea nuclear reactor. So they had the first nuclear-powered submarine, which is the Nautilus, USS Nautilus, which entered service in the 50s. And ever since, the Americans have not looked back. The Russians, of course, caught up after them. And today we have just 6 countries, including India, which operate nuclear-powered submarines. And nuclear submarines are the ultimate submarines. Like I said, once they sail out of port, they can stay underwater almost indefinitely.
You never know where they are, basically.
You don't know where they are. They're out there. They're underwater. They're making, air. They're cracking seawater to get oxygen, and they have literally unlimited steam power from the turbines that they're running. And the nuclear reactor, which is used to power everything over there. So they are almost power independent. But what we're looking at is air independent propulsion basically extends the underwater stay of a submarine from about 48 hours, when you need to come up for your breath of air to charge your diesels, to something like 10 days, 12 days, based on how big your AIP plug essentially is. So that's what we are looking at. We're looking at a number of technologies. There is the MESMA technology, which the French have. We have a lithium-ion technology that's also there for AIP. You have the DRDO that's working on its own AIP capsule, which will be retrofitted into the Scorpene-class submarines when they come for their refits, all 6 of them. So there's a fair bit of technology that's going into AIPs, but these are essentially poor man's alternatives to nuclear propulsion.
I was going to say jugaad, but
yeah, that word again. Dave, you like that word? I know that. So but the thing is that there are certain countries that do not operate conventional submarines. The Americans don't, the British don't, the French don't, right? The Chinese and the Russians do, because of their very unique geographies.
Right.
If you look at China, there are a lot of choke points, there are a lot of shallow water areas. So primarily, you need conventional submarines when you're looking at operating in shallower reaches, choke points, those kind of things. These are all great for operating conventional submarines. And our logic is also the same, that we do need a large number of conventional submarines. We do need nuclear-powered attack submarines. We needed them not yesterday, but day before yesterday, if you ask me. Because we've been operating nuclear-powered attack submarines since 1991, more than 3 decades, thanks to the Russians. So we know the power of a nuclear-powered attack submarine. It is the ultimate undersea predator. It is just because it has this unlimited power. It has this. It can sprint at high speed. It can chase down aircraft carriers. It carries missiles, and it is the only platform that you can actually project into contested enemy waters. You have, say, the South China Sea. I don't see us sending carrier battle groups into the South China Sea, right? Because it is so heavily defended, and despite and it's like a bastion. And if you want, the ideal platform that you would want to send into the South China Sea would be a nuclear-powered attack submarine, or even a conventional submarine. But those have their limitations, basically, of range and endurance and all that. Because by the time you reach your petrol station, it's already you've expended nearly 50% of your time. Your transit times are horrendous because of the geography involved. So the nuclear-powered submarine is the ultimate undersea predator, and I think we need a mix of both. And the Navy, in its wisdom, has said that look, we need the 24 submarines that they're planning, and we possibly need 6 more nuclear-powered attack submarines. You can debate about the numbers, but essentially, I think going forward, India will have both, because the advantages of the submarine are tremendous, and given the kind of weapons that are now coming on board submarines, like you have very long-range land attack cruise missiles, you have long-range anti-ship missiles, 1,000-kilometer range plus, right? You're looking at cruise missiles that can strike at 1,500 kilometers and all that. So incredible ranges. We have indigenous programs for this. The DRDO has an indigenous cruise missile program for submarine-launched versions as well. The Russian Federation has Caliber missiles, which I'm told they are planning to offer to us when President Putin visits. So the submarine's utility as a instrument of sea denial is formidable, and it's only going to increase in the years ahead as weapons and sensors are more and more advanced, and they're integrated into submarines.
On nuclear powered attack submarines, there was a very nice quote from one of your pieces actually, of Rear Admiral Raja Menon, who actually calls them the ultimate arbiter
Arbiter of sea power. Yes, Admiral Menon is like literally, he's the go-to person for nuclear submarines and nuclear submarine strategy. And in fact, not only that, it's also about nuclear strategy itself. And the reason for we have a second strike capability is that you need to put a certain number of nuclear weapons out at sea, so that it ensures a survivable deterrent, and that will allow you to launch a second strike. And this is to basically threaten your potential adversary that do not try to take out my assets in a first strike, because there will be a second strike that will follow. So he's a master of that, in terms of he has got all the numbers right, and I believe he's inputted into the numbers, which are of course highly classified, the actual numbers of weapons that we need to put out there. And so he works nuclear strategy and deterrence and all of that. So his quotes are his interactions have actually thrown up a number of interesting possibilities about why we need to, in the years ahead, increasingly go towards the undersea realm for not only attack submarines, but also almost shifting your nuclear deterrent underwater.
Especially for a country like us, because we have a defined no first use policy. So, and that no first use policy also says that, but if you do strike at us, then hell is going to come to you.
Right.
Then
So
only
that's
way
the
to
whole thing
rein
of
hell
deterrence.
is to have your right. We'll talk more on this topic, but after a quick break.
The art of listening and also the art of saying truly, what your boundaries are. It is growing.
Correct.
It really is growing. I see it in, even though Gen Z doesn't like much time, but they do know how to listen, and they do also know how to very frankly say what's on their mind.
Absolutely.
Which makes it much easier. Now you say that you don't want love, I'm fine alone, I don't need you, but you do need me.
Correct.
So it's better you say you need me only, na?
Correct.
So it is, you're right, there is a lot of hope.
And Sally, you
forward.
gave that example, and I very recently, I was at this conference, and our own conference, and somebody had got their kid along. He's a 10, 15-year-old guy. So I asked him, did you like it? And he was absolutely blunt. He said, no, I didn't like it. I think it was a waste of my time. And I'm looking at him, and he's, the father is aghast with, but they say their mind. And they say it very, very openly, not trying to buffer things. And we see this characteristic in the Gen Z particularly, because they're challenging the norms, and they are willing to be very, they're willing to shape their lives as they want.
Welcome back. Sandeep, you were just talking about nuclear powered attack submarines,
Yeah.
and you described them, and I think I can picture them as sort of the special forces,
Right.
if you were to say, of the Indian Navy, where you can send a small unit,
Yeah.
one submarine, it'll be
Right.
fast, lethal, light,
Yes,
people won't be
yes,
able to detect
yes.
it. It'll cause maximum damage and just
Yes.
come back from the enemy lines.
And the thing is that they tie down very large numbers of the enemy
Yeah.
who have to look for you. Then, if you're able to push out one SSN into a certain area, you'll have the entire enemy surface and subsurface forces looking for you. So it's able to tie down a large number of enemy combatants.
Yeah.
And this is something that the enemy can do to us, vice versa. So you have to be, wary of that as well.
Yeah, right. My next point is two questions sort of linked together. Why is it that any approval from the government when it comes to submarine projects, it
Yeah.
takes very, very, very long. Let's take the example of Project 75I. The
Right.
one that we are talking about is to build the AIP based
Yes.
submarines, essentially.
Yes.
The conventional submarines that are not nuclear
Yeah.
powered, but they're high tech and the most advanced.
Yes.
The idea itself was first floated in 2007 around.
Yes.
Not the idea. I think the idea was part of the 30-year project we were
That's
talking
right.
about.
Late 90s.
But 2007 is when I think Indian Navy
Yes.
first put out the formal request
Yes.
for
RFI.
proposals. Yes, and it in 2024 is
Yeah.
when you have the first winning bid. This is
Yes.
a tie-up between the India's Masgard Dock Limited
Yeah.
and a German company, TKMS,
TKMS.
ThyssenKrupp
Maritime Systems, yeah.
Systems. There is still no contract, by the way.
Right.
In 2021, you wrote a piece and you had said that we are unlikely to see a contract until the end of 2024. And you were bang on. We still haven't seen that contract.
Right.
Because right now we are waiting for a cabinet committee on security approval.
Yes.
Similarly, with the nuclear powered attack submarines, again, I'm guessing that was part of the 30-year project back in the
Yes.
90s.
Yes.
However, the CCS approval for that came only just last year.
Right.
So what is it and why is it that the government takes so long to approve projects at different stages? Because obviously you need to have
Right.
civilian oversight on such projects and different stages of
Yeah.
approval.
Yeah.
And the linked question: what makes them so goddamn expensive? Back of the calculation, based on numbers I got over different years, the ATV project for your ballistic missile submarines that costs around 96,000 crore.
Right.
The SSN project for nuclear powered attack submarines costs around 90,000 crore.
Right.
The 75 India project has now ballooned up to 76,000 crore. It was
Yes.
supposed to be around 45,
43
46.
43,000 crore.
That's gone up
yeah.
to 76,000 crore based on
Yeah.
latest estimate. All of that together comes to around 2,60,000 crore.
Right.
Which is the double of what was the capital expenditure allocation, which is the money government gives for new projects every
Right.
year to the defense armed forces.
Yeah.
In 2025, which was 1,80,000 crore, which was for all the three services.
Right.
So navies alone would be obviously the money
Yeah.
would not be given in one go. It would be in
Right.
stages. But what I'm trying to show to our listeners and viewers right now is the eye-popping amounts of money it takes to build
Yeah.
submarines. So why are they so expensive? And my earlier question, why does the government say it takes so long to approve them?
Well, a good question again, Dave. The thing is that submarines are extremely complex technology platforms. Especially, the bigger they get, the more expensive they are. You bring in nuclear propulsion, for instance. I can give you a ballpark figure for the Arihant-class. The last boat would have cost close to 9 or 10,000 crore per boat. But that's cheap if you look at it.
Okay.
That's just $1 billion, right? A comparable submarine, if it's built in a Western yard, would cost twice as much, $2 billion. So nothing for a nuclear submarine is nothing below $1 billion, right? And now, if you were to continue the Arihant-class line, for instance, as I've argued in my writings, we should have never stopped that line. We should have just kept that line going while we build the perfect nuclear-powered attack submarine, which is a bigger submarine, 12,000 tons plus. We should have continued what we had developed an expertise on and not shut the line at the fourth unit. Now, all nuclear-powered submarines are $1 billion plus. The fact is that even conventional submarines today are going to be that much, right? So you're looking at your Project 75 India, which is going to be close to $1 billion plus per boat. And that is where you get sticker shock, right? Because you've actually delayed for so long and you've budgeted 43,000 crore
Yes.
20 years, almost 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
That price is not going to hold for 2 decades, right? Because I think what has happened is that we kind of were not able to decide the technology, the build partners, how are we going to build it? Are we going to build it with this country or that country? Or, the whole RFI, the bureaucratic process overwhelmed the result that we were supposed to see, which is to start replacing all your aging platforms. And that is what has happened here. It's a very unfortunate delay of nearly 2 decades that you came up with this plan in the late 90s. And today, a quarter of a century later, we still haven't signed the first deal. And now what has happened is, again, it's the classic howitzer case that you were unable to decide on imports for the howitzer, and meanwhile your domestic capabilities have slowly caught up. You have people in the private sector who are now making guns, howitzers. You have the public sector as it is, which reopened their blueprints and started building howitzers. You have the same thing happening here, but though not as many companies are there, because submarine building is literally the acme of technology, whether it's conventional or it's nuclear. Conventional submarines, there's possibly a handful of companies in the world that build it. But today in India, you have the happy situation of having 2 people, one private company that can build submarines and one public sector company that can build it, L&T and Mazagon Docks Limited, MDL, right? So I think what we've now kind of focused on after 25 years of trying is that MDL is going to make all the conventional submarines. L&T will make all the strategic submarines, the big ones. Whether it's the SSNs, 2 have been sanctioned. They will start. They're at an advanced stage of design. Of course, that is that's also a very complex piece of technology. It's going to be more than a decade before the first indigenous SSN hits the water. It's a 12,000 plus ton boat. It's a large boat, 190 megawatt reactor, the same as the S5. So it'll have a common reactor. It'll be a large one, like the Akula-class boat that we got from the Russian Federation. We have a third one coming in, a lease, Chakra 3. So you're looking at a situation where you'll have conventional submarines, like I said, and nuclear-powered submarines. But the cost again. One reason that we are looking at we could have brought down the costs was if we had pursued a single line for conventional submarines. We should have just gone down that one Indian submarine line, made it with a combination of the private sector or the public sector. While the ATV project was being built, you could have built a conventional submarine also in parallel without wanting to go and get technology from foreign countries. And we've always got into this technology loop. That first with the West Germans in 81, then we shut down that line. Then we went to the French. 2005, Scorpene. We didn't get any technology. So then we are running again for 75I to a third country to get technology, which is the Germans again. And then you have the Russians waiting around the corner with more kilo-class submarines. And, so everybody's... And we are in a bit of a crisis here. Because of this constant shifting of goalposts, I see, over the last 2 decades, we have not been able to, identify our requirements and go hell for leather. Go down that straight path. And we have this very interesting case, which I came across a couple of years back, of South Korea. South Korea is a country that goes to the same West German yard, HTW, in 1987, 6 years after we bought our submarines from them. They pick up the Type 209 submarine and they start building their own through transfer of technology, which as I told you, the West Germans were very generous in sharing tech then. The Koreans pursued that one line of submarines and they had some infusions, but they continued down that line. The German submarine, I think they had a 212 at some point. The 209 became the 212. But they continued that submarine building line. They captured the submarine building expertise, the design expertise, which is the clincher. If you design your own submarines, then you're gods, So they mastered that technology. And lo and behold, a couple of years back, they came back to India and they said, listen, We want to build submarines for you. P-75I. So this is the country that bought submarines 6 years after us, and now they're coming back to us with the iteration of that same submarine thing, and that, to my mind, was the biggest, in your face embarrassment, that you have a country that pursued the single path of monogamy, and here we were, multiple partners, French, Russian, German, we couldn't figure out what. The Indian thing was never explored, but now there is an Indian design also underway. The DRDO, L&T, and the ATVP, most importantly, the ATV project, the Strategic Submarine Project, people are putting their heads together because they have design expertise to design submarines. Mazdox is not a submarine designer, they're a submarine builder. L&T is a submarine builder, but they haven't designed submarines yet. So it's only the Indian Navy that's actually designed the submarine. So they are now coming up with an indigenous SSK, which would be the submarine that we're going to get after 75I. So 75I kind of becomes a stopgap. It'll be a lifeline which will give you about 6 boats before you can start building your own. So it is a bit of a crazy situation when you're looking at numbers. And I think if you are confused about these numbers and these different programs, you can imagine what it'll be out there for the person who's reading this or even watching it. The number of it's an alphabet soup. It just needed to be one class of submarines which we should have just pursued. We could have had various variants of it in, maybe a lighter version, or 800-ton version and a heavier version. So there have been such designs in the past. And I think the original sin was that we didn't pursue the German line. We should have possibly continued down that line through some means that, look, this is taxpayer money that went. Exactly with the Bofors, as with the Bofors, that somebody at some point decided, hey, listen, we're not getting any guns, might as well take the blueprints and start building these subs. And they should have done that with HGW. And who knows, we probably wouldn't have needed 75I or 76 and 77 and all these numbers. We could have, actually built the true Indian design, developed submarines. And, and it's really important now they have to get our submarines, because when we don't have submarines to offer, every navy in the world today wants them. Right? There is a massive submarine race across the world, especially in Asia. Smaller navies are looking at it as a very effective means of sea denial. Right? They want to get, they're threatened, say, that by the rise of China. What is the first thing that Vietnam did when they were faced with the Chinese aggression? Did they buy a whole lot of warships? No, they went and bought a whole lot of submarines from the Russians. So they have between 6 and 8 kilo-class submarines, was one of the largest deals. Pakistan Navy, they have a surface navy, but they went and got a whole lot of submarines when they realized that the Indian Navy was growing to such an extent that it would threaten their lifelines. So they went for that. So a whole lot of countries are going in for submarines. Bangladesh has got its 2 submarines. Thailand is buying submarines. Indonesia wants submarines. But when they turn to us, we don't have a submarine design of our own. And therefore, we can't give them a submarine. And therefore, that becomes an opportunity for another country to enter the thing. China, of course. So we, in the past, a couple of years back, we transferred one of our kilo-class submarines to the Myanmarese Navy, because we wanted to kind of, build bridges with them, ensure the Chinese don't get a, free walkthrough. So these are very powerful instruments of diplomacy, foreign policy, and also building bridges with other countries. And submarine is a very, very powerful instrument of that. And till the time you don't build your own, you don't, operate them yourself, you're not going to be able to offer it to other countries. So this is something we should have done a long, long time ago. But, I'm hopeful. Glass half full.
Glass half full. I think that answers what was going to be my follow-up over there, is that this contrast I see within the Indian Navy, where you have your surface ships primarily being made in India by Indian shipbuilders, because I think the Navy realized long ago that for it, the only option was make in India because of prohibitive costs of almost anything Navy. Anything water is just very damn expensive.
And anything under the water is even more expensive. As
so discussed. They knew long ago that this is the way to go. So I think the shipbuilding is pretty much sorted. You have world-class ships coming out of Indian dockyards.
Yeah, aircraft carriers. We've built aircraft. Exactly, an aircraft carrier.
Right. Couple of last points. I'm guessing this one must have come to you very often. And this is for somebody. So when you think of a nuclear ballistic submarine,
Yeah.
and you think of a nuclear powered attack submarine,
Yeah.
it just seems very odd to me that you have managed to develop a nuclear ballistic missile submarine, but have not managed to develop a nuclear powered attack submarine. Because
Right.
to my mind,
Yeah.
the other one seems more difficult to do.
Right.
How did we do it the other way around, or did we actually?
Well, it is actually easier to do a ballistic missile submarine than it is a nuclear powered attack submarine, because the difference is an SSBN is a bomber, right? It carries bombs. In this case, nuclear weapons. The nuclear powered attack submarine is a fighter jet, but you have to understand when it's operating underwater at such high speeds, it has to do speeds of over 30 knots. It has to accelerate, decelerate. The reactor has to have a very different kind of a reactor. Whereas in the case of an SSBN, once you've cracked the reactor tech, we've been building our own reactors for the 4 Arihant-class submarines. All the SSBN has to do is to just go out there quietly and lurk out there. He's not chasing any task forces. He's not attacking targets at land. He's just quiet, and he just has to remain out at sea for months on end. That's what a deterrent patrol really is. And then he has to return to base, and then another submarine will go out. So you have what is called continuous at-sea deterrent patrols, CSDPs. So that is what a ballistic missile submarine is. Whereas for a nuclear-powered attack submarine, he's a fighter jet. He's shooting around the place. He's got multiple tasks. He has to accompany the fleet. He's the screen of the carrier battle group. So the idea is that we have 2 carrier battle groups. Each one must have at least 1 attack submarine who's guarding the perimeter, looking around for other enemy submarines, moving ahead of the fleet, carrying out special missions. The other role that they have is to escort your SSBNs, especially when they are exiting the bastion areas. The bastion area is the area that you secure when your submarine kind of exits the base, when it's most vulnerable.
Right.
So he moves ahead of the SSBN, he escorts the SSBN, looks around for enemies and stuff like that. And he carries out special missions, enters the enemy territory. And, like I said, the only platform that can enter contested waters is a attack submarine. So he has multiple roles, and he has to have a very high performance reactor, which is what many countries have not been able to address very successfully. Only 5 countries have. Possibly there will be a 6th before us, and that is Brazil. So Brazil has got the SBR program, which
would have never thought that country.
where they're getting a nuclear powered submarine with some assistance from the French. And possibly we will have a submarine and a nuclear powered attack submarine, but on lease from the Russian Federation, the Chakra 3, which will end 23rd. End of this decade is when it will be in service, 28 or 29. But our indigenous nuclear powered attack submarine is way into the future, into the next decade, possibly even towards the end of the next decade. These are complex platforms to build. It's not just about making the hull. That's the easy part. You just build those sections, you join them together. It is the nuclear powered reactor, right? The pressurized water reactor, which is so complex, and given the size that we have in mind, the 190 megawatt thing, it's a big beast. So for us to do that, it's going to be an uphill climb, a technology thing, and you have to give it time. These things are not built overnight, which is why I have been arguing again in my writings, Dave, is that we should have continued the Arihant line. You have 4 SSBNs, modest size, 6,000 tons, the smallest SSBNs in the world. Build 4 more of this class, call them SSNs. They may not be the fastest and the most dynamic SSNs, but you will have a very big force of undersea weapon carriers, long range missiles. We're getting hypersonic missiles from the DRDO. It could be like a SSGN, a cruise missile carrying submarine, which just goes there and does pretty much what an SSN is supposed to do, minus the very high reactor output which the Project 77 SSN is supposed to bring in. But here you have a modest size kind of thing. which will allow you to hone your technology further. You've done 4 iterative, manufacturing. Do 4, a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, but never allow that production to end. This is something the Chinese would have done for sure.
Right.
They will not, kill a project saying, oh no, it's underpowered, it's this, that. Remember the Marut, right? So I think we should have just continued down that thing and got those 4 more units. They would have come, of great use for us in, say, when you're fighting long-range campaigns to influence the land battle, for instance, hit targets deep inland. These submarines, which are actually SLBM carriers, can be retrofitted to fire long-range cruise missiles, long-range hypersonic missiles, those kind of things.
Yeah.
That is an option we should have started some time back. But there again, it's a matter of yard capacity now. That your yards which were to build the ATV are now the Ariane-class are now switching over to the new class, which is S5.
The bigger one.
The bigger one, which is
The actual one,
12,000,
actual nuclear-powered ballistic missile.
SSBN. But I think there is always capacity that can be found to continue this line. The idea is that, these are national capacities, expertises that you've built over decades, right? The ATV program has been almost 3 decades. You've got dedicated personnel, you have submarine welders, builders. This is a very, very high-tech game, which the Americans are now restarting, relearning. They've projected a doubling of their submarine fleet, primarily to handle the Chinese threat. But here we are very happy with our small numbers. And, just to tell your viewers, the Chinese are building in 1 and 2 years more nuclear submarines than India has built in 30 years.
Wow.
Right? That is the kind of lead that they're taking in the submarine building arena. And they see this as great powers. They see the utility of submarines, nuclear-powered attack submarines. And these are great power tools. And I'm not saying that we must match the Chinese up in numbers, but we should definitely do it in with intent and some amount of, get 6, 8, 12, maybe not 50 and 60 like the Americans. We have no agenda to pursue power across the Indo-Pacific. We are very content in this sphere. But even there, you need to have numbers. And those numbers will come when we get our submarine building act together.
And also, I think, because Sandeep, I think also we should make this clear to our listeners and viewers as well, is that when it comes to the Navy, it's not important. It's not an asset that comes to your aid or help only at times of war.
Yeah.
Unlike with the Air Force or the Army, the Navy plays a much bigger role in
Yes.
ensuring your economic stability.
Absolutely.
Because your global trade lines majority of them are through the waters.
90% of our trade by value,
And
volume.
if you have the Chinese Navy, which it already is, coming into the Indian Ocean, trying to intersect your trade lines, that's going to be an economic problem.
No, you've
for
hit the nail on the head, Devan. This is what I worry about, is that I don't worry about intentions, because like everyone says that intentions just change overnight. But I'm worried about capabilities. At what point does the Chinese Navy get the ability or the capability to project large numbers of nuclear-powered attack submarines into the Indian Ocean region, thereby threatening your own sea lanes of communications, right? So you can argue, yes, we have a very competent ESW architecture and we have assistance from our Western allies and all that. But till the time you are not able to project power into his backyard, kind of a quid pro quo, you will not be a very credible maritime power, and that, or a blue water navy. So it's a very important component of blue waters, given the fact that how crucial, as you mentioned, the seas are to India's economy. Without the oceans, we cannot have a Viksit Bharat or a third largest economy by the end of this decade.
Very, very true.
We are entirely dependent on the seas for all our communication, even with the seabed cables, right? Your trade, imports, exports, energy, everything is on the seas, right? And we cannot have the situation where an adversary thinks that, look, there is something that I can do on India's western and eastern seaboards. The next standoff, God forbid, may not be at Galwan. It might be
In the ocean.
or in the oceans, in the Arabian Sea or the Indian Ocean or the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah. Final question, rather. The age-old question for the Indian Navy, especially because of the prohibitive costs involved when it comes to naval assets. Submarines versus aircraft carrier, because पैसा उतना ही है.
Right.
Okay, you can have great ambitions of of being like the US Navy, having like
Yes.
tens of aircraft carriers
Right.
and so many nuclear powered submarines, but that's the amount of money you have
Yes.
until your economy becomes the third largest, second largest, and so on. At some point, that question has to be finally answered once and for all, and that time is running out, I think, because
Right.
like with the SSBN project, the expertise that you built with the INS Vikrant, the homemade aircraft carrier,
Yes.
that's going to be running out soon. The people employed in that project already might be looking for different jobs if they haven't gotten them already, by the way. So that expertise will soon go out of the system.
Yes.
For you to be able to keep that expertise and make the most of it, maybe make another aircraft at cheaper cost, you have to decide soon. But again, that means allocating money,
Yes.
and that money sadly will come out of your submarine budget then. So has that question been answered once and for all, or are we still?
I think how the Navy looks at it is that it is able to pay for both submarines and aircraft carriers. And I think, as you correctly pointed out, the very basic requirement for us is to build another aircraft carrier to replace the Vikramaditya, which will go out of service in the next decade or so, because she's already been in the water since 1987, right? So it's approaching the fourth decade. Now it will need a replacement.
Yeah.
And that replacement you should start building now. And that will come to about 2 carriers. The Navy is, of course, projected a 3-carrier Navy. But it seems unlikely to me, because unless you get to the capability or, of the American aircraft carriers of the size that they have, the Nimitz-class, the Ford-class carriers, which are actually true blue aircraft carriers, which are almost 100,000 tons displacement, which carry 50, 60 fighter jets, which are true aircraft carriers capable of projecting power. But then you have to then look at the number. Can you afford the $5-6 billion sticker cost with an additional $2, $3, $4 billion for the fighter jets, more than $10 billion per carrier? Can you afford it right now? If you can't, then what is it in the interim that you need to do to ensure that you have the capability to influence the maritime battle and the battle on land from the sea? So you have to do those maths, whether it is how many vertical launch silos can you carry out to sea, for instance? Where will it come from? Where will that ordnance be? Will it be from the submarines? Will it be from aircraft carriers? Will it be from surface ships? All of that. I think a fair mix has to be worked out. Looking at our current, threat horizon, which is China and Pakistan possibly operating, collusively in the not so distant future. So I think this call has to be taken by the Navy very shortly, and that 1 carrier replacement is an urgent requirement. They need to replace that. But into the near future, if you look at in the next 20, 30 years, I think the ocean is going to be very, very, the surface of the sea is going to be very hostile for anything on the surface of the water, because you can be detected, tracked, and monitored and attacked in real time, and the only safe, secure space for you, at least in the next couple of decades, is going to be the undersea realm. And I think that is where a lot of navies have now begun investing all their resources. The Americans are already there. The Russians have been there for a while. The Chinese are going big time. So which is why you see the kind of activity that in the IOR with their spy ships and their hydrographic vessels coming, looking for areas where their submarines can operate and all that. So the Chinese are literally shaping the maritime battlefield here in the IOR region. And it is for us to, respond to it, either by creating our own organizations to handle that, our own commands, underwater commands perhaps, or investing in the platforms that can address this threat. And this is, I'm talking of the next 10, 20 years. It's already begun, and it's going to hit a crescendo in the 2040s and the 50s, when the race for seabed minerals and all that happens. And that's a whole new, different kind of warfare that you're looking at. So I think that is something that we should be already thinking about, planning for, and resourcing and thinking ahead. So I think it's not just about a carrier or a submarine battle. It's about the race for capabilities as well, right? What are the kind of capabilities that you need to build? It's quite possible that in beyond the 2040s, you might not even need submarines, because you're looking at a time when everything on the seabed is going to be networked. Manned submarines might be a thing of the past. So you're looking at very large unmanned submarines carrying torpedoes and missiles and all that. Large drone ships, flying underwater, underwater aircraft carriers even. I mean, it's been in the realm of science fiction now for massive aircraft carriers carrying drones that submerge,
yeah,
and then they pop out, they launch their aircraft, and then they submerge. So the ocean is going to be a very interesting realm in the next couple of decades, especially given the kind of investments in technology and R&D that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, right. Aren't you glad then you picked this topic to like sort of focus during your career? Then Sandeep?
Yeah, well, it's I think it's one of those interesting areas of niche areas, as you mentioned, and it just so happened that I see this as literally the future of warfare, and where our destiny basically is on the seabed. If you're able to get the kind of capabilities to mine the minerals on the seabed, who knows, we might not be the kind of resource poor country that we are now. And so that's it's a future looking move, I thought.
Right. Great, Sandeep. Excellent chat. More than I mean, it's an excellent chat at all times. But this one was, I think, even more fun because of, like you said, your expertise in this field. So thanks so much for this.
Thank you for having me there. Always a pleasure.
And thanks to all our listeners and viewers. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries without a passport. Bye bye.